Spiritually, we're at a pivot point. In this next block of time, we'll have the chance that may come only once this generation and maybe only once this century. A choice whether to emerge from the unprecedented worldwide shutdown and revert to the default, just get back to normal, or whether we'll emerge living differently, whether we bring about the great reset. The pandemic itself was unimaginable a year ago, but we learned that the unimaginable can happen. That means that the unimaginable reset can happen too post-pandemic because we are changed people. We've seen life differently in the last year. After being cooped up indoors, we rediscovered our desperate need to be outside in clean air, clean water, in nature. We also discovered that badge of pride for American progress, our electrical systems, they were overwhelmed by too much snow and too much heat, sending undrinkable water into Texas homes and destructive fires on the West Coast. We see more clearly, because of the pandemic, the need to protect our planet. We also see more clearly about how we treat each other. After a knee on George Floyd's neck presses down until our brother dies, gasping for breath, we see who could escape COVID to a safe, comfortable shelter away and who could not. Who, in order to survive, had to risk bringing the deadly disease home from work to elders and spouses, our Black and Latinx sisters, dying disproportionately, gasping for breath. Friends, if we are not battling to change all that we have so clearly seen, then we're complicit with it. We need to have a great reset of how we treat each other and how we treat our planet. We're at a spiritual turning point. And it's an astonishing opportunity, a call from God, an invitation to join God in this great work. But how do we do it? Today, I want to share 3 spiritual models for great resets. The first model is really historical. It's taught by Rebecca Solnit in her award-winning book, A Paradise Built in Hell. She describes major crises like the earthquakes of 1906 and 1989 in San Francisco, and the 9/11 attacks in New York City, the Hurricane Katrina rescue in New Orleans. She describes all these and discovers that disasters actually birth paradises of some kind. Now, for those of us who watched from a distance, Solnit says, the media we watch depicts these disasters as just great devastations. But for those who were actually present, they report extraordinary communities of mutual support that developed when we humans are at our best. In crises, people are calm and caring and extremely creative, focused on 2 goals that they do achieve: eliminating deprivation and making sure that everyone knows they belong, no one's excluded. Therefore, in both New York City and in New Orleans, boats of all sizes immediately appeared as if from nowhere, lifting to safety millions in self-organized and tireless rescues, returning again and again till all had been helped. Thousands of volunteers flocked to areas of need, offering free food, free medicine, free bedding, free clothes, profits ignored. People on the street trust each other. Strangers ignore differences of race and color or class. Everyone is kin. After the 1989 earthquake, writer Rebecca Salkin said that the person that she was angry at no longer mattered. The anger had evaporated because everyone had to focus on the now. They couldn't hoard for the future or hold on to some past grudge or distinctions of insider and outside. And most telling, survivors of these major disasters tell of a startling, deep joy that they do not forget because of the way people treat one another so kindly, so generously. Years later, they still speak of it with yearning for that experience again. a little 8-year-old during the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, wrote later that vast numbers of people escaped to her neighborhood in Oakland at the time of that San Francisco earthquake. And all homes opened to anyone who needed room. Meals were prepared in kitchens that grew out along the streets, and all the women in the neighborhood, including her mother, gave away every scrap of clothing. That little girl was Dorothy Day, who always later yearned to recreate the time when people just loved each other, as she said. It led her later to birth the Catholic worker movement and the Catholic worker houses. These history examples teach that when the old order utterly breaks apart, what people yearn for is what most deeply happens. It's intrinsic in our human nature. We are altruistic and generous, and we work together so that deprivation ends and everyone belongs. Out of our crisis of 2020, what will we take with us? Will it be our gratitude to hospital cleaning staff and grocery store employees, the pride that our government did support those in greatest need? Or will we take with us outrage for the power our side couldn't keep and the lies told to retain the reins? We're at a spiritual pivot point. The second example of a great reset was sparked for me by Dory Seavey in our Lenten booklet. Dory inspired this whole Lenten journey based on her own experiences during COVID, her new way of seeing the world. Dory has a PhD in economics for Yale. She's classically trained in the field. But during this time, she has begun to recognize that the market economy, with its model of competition and dominance, has awful consequences for the planet and people. What is an alternative to which we can reset? Robin Wall Kimmerer asks this same question and looks to indigenous gift economies, in which, for example, a hunter who brings home an animal too large for his own family does not store the leftovers for later, but shares it with the rest of the community. I store it, says the hunter, in my neighbor's stomach. Indigenous people first see the gift that the slain animal has given to them. The hunters are grateful to the animal and, out of respect for that giver, take only what they need and share the rest with their community. When we look at what we have as a gift and are grateful, gratitude inspires us to be more generous. In turn, those receiving from the hunter are also grateful, and they want to reciprocate. Riches in this gift society are measured not by how wealthy one individual hunter is, but by the health of the whole community. Value comes from relationships, not from material possessions. Applying these lessons to our times, COVID can reset what is most important to us. We can see our life more as a gift of grace than a right we've earned. We can see all the beloveds we've been unable to hug or touch as the true gifts that they are. We can be more deeply grateful to King's Chapel for what this community has provided us in our time of need, and we can see that our personal health is inextricably tied up with others' health in our worlds. It is a mutual community. There's a third model for a great reset, and it comes from that story that Kathy read to us, in which 5,000 men plus all their families are fed. It's one of the few Bible stories told by all four gospel writers. It's safe to assume that it's a central story to Jesus' operation. And today, I see it as a model for a great reset. Because think of it, there was a throng that was tired and hungry, far from home, with no easy prospect of any meal. And they were all fed and satisfied. And they returned back 12 baskets, still available to share with others. Looking at this case study of a great reset, what are the essential steps to make it happen? It wasn't a propitious start. Jesus had been teaching and healing for some time, and he has sent out his disciples, his students, 2 by 2 into the villages. They're students of Jesus just like us, trying to support people the way Jesus does. But while we and they are away, we hear that King Herod has beheaded John the Baptist, a man we and Jesus count as a friend. In turmoil and, of course, in fear, we flood back, fearful or outraged that powerful, selfish people like Herod can wreak their havoc with impunity. People from the countryside have also arrived. They're seeking consolation or direction, but we're all exhausted, even Jesus. And in that chaos, Jesus proposes a retreat. Oh, yes. We, his close students, will get away with him for a while, over on the distant shore where no one will ever find us. But the people have been unnerved, and they run along the shore and hillside around the large lake and meet us when our boat lands. We need the retreat. But Jesus has compassion on the group, looking for a next leader because John is gone. So at Jesus' instruction, we all sit and listen, trying to internalize the idea of a God who delights in each of us. Jesus teaches us to pray to this God who loves us for what we need that day. Give us this day our daily bread. But like Moses' people were to take just enough manna for that day, don't hoard, Jesus says. Seek only enough and share what you have. Love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. What good will it do if you store up things here on earth when you can't take it with you? See these beautiful lilies. See these little sparrows. They have enough, even more than enough. God loves all of this earth, all of its creatures, all of you. It's late. Homes are distant. Peter gives Jesus the cue. Let them go so that they can pick up something to eat on their way home. Shops won't stay open forever. And Jesus says, you feed them. You feed them. Peter sputters back just what we'd say if we'd been told, you feed Boston's hungry in the pandemic. The kids whose parents lost their jobs, the moms who are skipping meals, the people who live at shelters and eat at church feeding programs, all now closed due to COVID. If we heard, you feed them, wouldn't we also say, oh, but there are too many. The problem's too big. It would cost too much. We don't have enough money. Can't they just go and take care of themselves? And Jesus responds, what do you have? While Peter is searching, Jesus asks the people to sit down in groups by 50s and 100s, just about the number we humans can get to know, the number of names we can remember without name tags, the size group in which we can get to talk to one another, recognize faces, and that's what folks do. When Peter comes back with one lunch pack with one sandwich inside, it's a big one and there's some extra pieces, but it's not much. But Jesus is grateful for the gift someone has given. He's genuinely grateful. People see that. And Jesus gives God thanks for that gift. Then Jesus takes what he has and he breaks it into different pieces and then he shares it with the people who are there. Food that he could have eaten or that the disciples could have eaten, he offers to the people who are present. What steps are essential in this case study? Does this reset model turn on Jesus having compassion for the people, making them all feel that they belong, on his vision of how we could live in this world? Does it turn on Jesus' command, you feed them? After the disciples protest that the problem's too big and the cost is too high, does the story become the great reset because Jesus asks, what do you have? Does the gift of one inspire others to bring out the tiny bits that they've stored away? Does the gratitude of Jesus for the one lunch bag unlock something? Do people gathered in those groups see each other as all belonging, all someone's parent or someone's hungry kid? Are the most hungry people so grateful for what they get, they take only what they need to be sure no one has to go without? Whatever happened, apparently people remembered that night for a long time, and they kept telling its story. They yearned for that feeling again where everyone just loved one another. And so they tell the story over and over until it is finally written down by Matthew and Mark, by Luke and John. What part of Jesus' bread and fishes story is most important, I wonder? Are there any elements that we could take away and still have all we need for a great reset? Here at King's Chapel, I am awed by those of you who are curious about a reset, those of you who are committed to a great reset when we come out of this pandemic. One wise one says that with whatever time she has left on Earth, she will work to protect the planet and its creatures from climate change. One of our wise young ones probes, can a Christian church have the size of endowment we do and not give some of it away when others are hurting so much? Our wise clergyman calls us to consider reparations, not narrowly defined as certain sums to particular people, but defined as mending what is broken, leaving the world better than when we entered it, repairing the breach. We're not obligated to complete the repair, but neither are we allowed to set that work down. And our wise prophet Isaiah writes that God herself says of the Great Reset, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not remember the things of old, for do you not see it? I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." And we can take part with God in that great reset. May it be so.